Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hope you're having a good day. My name is Casey Willis, and I am the podcast manager at Goody Nation. If you don't know, Goody Nation is an organization that exists to bridge the relationship gap between so many promising founders and opportunities that can help their businesses thrive. So, when we say bridge the relationship gap, like what does that mean? We're talking about the almost sort of intangible things that can help a founder find opportunities for funding, for mentorship, for just partnerships and networking that are sometimes a little less easy for founders, especially founders of color and founders in the social entrepreneurship space to attain. And so, this podcast that you're listening to right now is Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. And relationships are the cornerstone of bridging that relationship gap, obviously. And so we love talking to amazing founders, VCs, investors about the ways that they were able to leverage relationship building to grow their ventures and to grow their careers. And so today, as always, we have an amazing guest. We have Alan Woodruff, who is the executive director of the Founders Mental Health Pledge. Thank you so much for being with us today, Alan.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so, actually, I would love for you to tell us about the Founders Mental Health Pledge. What is this organization?
For sure. So, one of the things that is true for founders, right? Founders make sacrifices at the expense of their mental health. And, the founder journey is hard, especially in, the current macro and micro environment of the economy. In March 2023, this all culminated, right? These are universal truths, but it culminated in just the difficulty that was happening within the banking environment. And Naveed Lalani and Brad Baum used that as an opportunity to really, as a catalyst, to talk about the real issue. The real issue wasn't necessarily the banking or kind of the funding environment. The real issue was the impact that it was having on founders' mental health. So they chose that as an opportunity to think about, like, how can we lean in to create a source or mechanism for change. And that's where it started, right? So it started as a Google Doc. Naveed Lalani is actually a friend from grad school, and Brad Baum, both founders and also investors. They took that as an opportunity to say, how can we use this as a galvanizing moment to really galvanize the community and talk about how can we create change and really acknowledge founder mental health. Fast forward, as soon as I saw it, it started this huge wave within the startup ecosystem. I reached out to Naveed, and the first thing was, how can I help? And, that led into, me serving as executive director. And the balance of last year, we spent from turning it to a Google Doc to actually a 501(c) organization. And, it started as a Google Doc, now has over 712 investors and startup leaders who've signed it in 26,000. That represents 26,000 portfolio companies. And, one of the things at the beginning, the pledge, the impetus of the pledge, it started as prioritizing founder mental health and also having it as a pledge to have it as a legitimate business expense. That is still, one of our core priorities. But now we're focusing on founders, creating a community, a safe space to destigmatize the conversation around founder mental health for investors, right? Like, what is leaning in and actually making an impact look like? And then for a lot of the system providers, whether they're clinicians or those who have startups who are creating solutions for mental health, we're advising them. So it's, a less than a year. We're now, beginning of 2024, and just to see how much momentum we've created, and what started as a pledge and now is a true impact organization. So as mentioned, like, our vision is really to destigmatize founder mental health. And more than that, it's more than a conversation. Like, where our vision is really to make an impact. So create a community where founders can feel seen and also comfortable having those conversations. And then the next is really to create impact. And I'll talk about that a bit more.
Amazing. Creating community is like one of the most natural ways to build relationships. And I love how this initiative started off as a Google Doc. We hear that a lot, with founders who are saying this just started as a Facebook group, or this just started as a group chat. Goody Nation actually started as a Facebook group. And so it just shows like sometimes you just need that spark to like do something.
All right, yeah, for
You
sure.
just don't know where it'll go. Speaking of the spark that serves as the catalyst to doing things, I'd love to learn more about you and your career path that sort of led you to where you are today as executive director. We love at Goody Nation to refer to it as the founder origin story.
I love
And
it.
so, going back to as far back as you want to go, what was sort of like the pivotal moments that kind of like led to where you are today in your career?
For sure. So I'll give a bit of my origin story and also talk a bit about Brad and Naveed as kind of the co-founders of the pledge. So you mean I always had a love for branding and marketing. So I started my career on the marketing side as a marketing executive. Spent 10 years at Coca-Cola, did all the things. And then, from there, got recruited out, went into financial services, became a founder of myself, on my own, creating growth marketing, and also advised a lot of high growth startups, unicorn startups, multi-billion dollar valuations. And to backtrack a little bit of why mental health is personal to me, I think early on in my career, especially being an underrepresented marketing executive, it's not something that many times it's further along in your career that you look at kind of the sacrifices that it took to get to where you are. And I think I had one of those moments of just burnout, right? I realized that the steps that I took to get to where I was, I didn't want to continue that for, the rest of my career, the rest of my life. I wanted to prioritize different things. So, my founder or my wellness and well-being journey kind of started about 7 to 8 years ago. And it's just always been, it now is a priority for me, right? Like it is a priority for me just in the same way that, normal medical care is. So like I've had an affinity for just mental health and well-being, and it's definitely a priority for me. And even philanthropy, I've done a lot of philanthropic work as maybe 20% of most of my roles, whether it was within Fortune 50 companies or a lot of the high growth startups. I've always had a passion for philanthropic endeavors, things that are related to wellness, but it was always the 20 to 30% of my role. And I think it was a unique time. The pandemic taught us a lot. I think we've all prioritized and thought about our priorities in life. And for me, one of my goals was, how do I focus my professional experience on things that are giving back and actually going to create an impact? And, Naveed and both Brad, they use the environment of what was happening in the startup ecosystem to create the pledge. And it was just kind of this beautiful synergy of, one, back to your point around relationships. Naveed and I, had a relationship from grad school. So, when I asked him how could I help, it was just this great synergy of how can we leverage my experience in growing organizations and building, impact organizations into leveraging the pledge. And I think, that's the amazing thing about what we're building. It is not just a Google Doc. Like, we are treating this the same way we would treat, any of the startups that we've worked on before, any of the startups that we're building. Like, we're creating a true impact organization. So like, that's why it's important to me for my own personal journey and just a passion of, wanting to use the next balance of my career to really create sustainable impact. And I can say the same for Naveed and Brad. Like, we really want to make change. And I think in less than a year's time, we've been able to see just the impact that we've been able to make, and hopefully, much more to come.
I absolutely love that. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about how you all are helping to lead the conversation in destigmatizing mental health care and wellness in the entrepreneurship space. You know, I come from the art world, especially theater, where we're basically like, oh my God, my schizophrenia is acting up today. Oh, my bipolar is
Right.
crazy. Like it's something that, for better or worse, is kind of a part of the community in a way. But for business, for entrepreneurship, this is almost like a new conversation of people just openly talking about, as founders, as investors, mental health struggles. And so I was wondering, what are some of the, I guess, the tactics or the strategies that you all help to lead, to make these conversations less, I guess, uncommon in the entrepreneurship space?
Yeah, what's really interesting and unique about the startup ecosystem, and there's been, the seminal research from Michael Friedman where it mentioned that 72% of entrepreneurs have self-reported mental health concerns, two times suicidal thoughts and depression, bipolar. So the predisposed, I think what makes founders great are also the things that are challenges as far as their mental health. So I think it's a very unique ecosystem in that regard. So I think one of the things that's amazing about this industry and is unique is that we are simply opening the door, right? We're creating a space to start the conversation. The other about the startup ecosystem is driven by stories. It is a narrative driven, ecosystem, right? It is how people raise, it is how they pitch, it is how they hire, it's how they grow. And usually, most of the stories that are told are the stories of success, the stories of, amazing ARRs and all the things that are success. The stories that are not often talked about is the toll that it took, and the times when a founder may have had a depressive episode and just not wanted to get up, or but had to tell the positive story for an award or for an article. So I think we're just creating an environment and trying to change that narrative and trying to, it's great to talk about the successes, but we also want to create an environment that talks about the reality of just how hard the founder journey is. And it's interesting that, the same with relationships. Once you open the door and start these conversations and allow one first share your own, that so many, founders are wanting, right, to say their own version of that. And I see that, every week, multiple times a week. And founders are looking for places, and so many are saying, we're so glad that this community, and I think that's why this community is growing so quickly and naturally, because founders have wanted a space like this to be able to have these stories. So that's what we're seeing, is that founders are telling their stories, and we are really serving as a catalyst to amplify those stories. And I think this is not something that is going to stop in a year. We hope that, we see more stories happening this year than we have last year. We hope that continues, because I think that is the biggest part of this continuing, is just to make it natural, right? Like, and I think, as you mentioned, like within theater and some other communities that may be more comfortable in having some of those emotional intelligence EQ conversations, we want that to be normal within the startup ecosystem. And then we hope that it, cascades to other industries as well. But I think the startup ecosystem is uniquely posed to be willing to talk about this. And the last thing I would say is that our stakeholders are founders first, right? Like, founders of giving them the permission, giving them resources, but investors, right? Like, this is very much an ecosystem where the tone is set from the top. And that's why it's very important for us that, amongst those who are pledge signers, a large constituent are, leaders and investors and leaders within the VC firms, because it's really important that, one, they share their stories, but also that they give stated permission to the portfolio companies to talk about it and also prioritize their mental health.
I love that. Storytelling as both a component for relationship building, but also as a component to break down like barriers to maybe getting support that you need, or maybe just having someone say like, oh no, that makes sense, I feel you, that's not weird at all. um it's not something you think about within the realm of like VC entrepreneurship, go go go. I'm curious for you, like sort of on that same topic with storytelling. Let's talk about networking. Of course, as you're if you're a founder and you're trying to make those relationships and connections, networking is incredibly important. And it's oftentimes just seen as like a purely business function, right? You have to network to get the deals, to get the. And so I'm curious for you, how does building a strong professional network, how does that like intertwine with like maintaining like healthy mental disposition, wellness, I guess even both professionally and personally? How does network building as a founder potentially impact one's mental health?
So it's such a interesting point. I think really germane to the startup ecosystem because networking is everything, right? It is where the conversation starts. It is where the relationships start that will be the impetus for building your company. So I think a lot, and we have the conversation so many times, and I hear from others when they're, stepping into new spaces and, they may not have had the networks before, like it's imposter syndrome comes up a lot. So I think there's a sense of entrepreneurs have to um, put on a confidence, many times when they're walking into new environments because their brand or their perception of their brand is often what leads them to next conversation. So I think that's an acknowledgement, and I think that's a very real thing. I think the opportunity within networking is to have deeper conversations, and I think we all need a sense of social safety. So it's not to say that the first introduction that you have to an investor or to those who are going to help amplify your startup is going to be one where you share, your mental health. But the goal is that, eventually you can have some of those conversations. And I have seen it myself. I know that Naveed and Brad, and really what's interesting in this role that I'm in now, and I think we spend a lot of time with surface level conversations. Whether it's a networking event of, how did you start your startup? How's your startup going? Maybe surface level things about your family, where you're vacationing and things like that. And I think those are usually most of our relationships or networking are those level of conversations. What's interesting about this space is that having the conversation and opening up about mental health, it doesn't have to be the full version of all the trauma and all the things, but just simply you're acknowledging that it's hard, right? Acknowledging, I had a hard day today, or things are harder. Um, Things that are going on in life are affecting, my business. Just opening up, it's amazing. It serves as a conduit, and I've had it in so many conversations that just having that conversation allows people to feel the permission to be vulnerable. So I think, within networking, the goal I think would be to have deeper conversations. And again, it can't exist within all avenues, but I think, the team setting, especially founders within leaders of companies, um, it's an opportunity for them to set the tone, and then to have some of those open conversations as well.
So I'm curious to know, like, so much of what you're saying, I of course resonate with, and I'm sure a lot of founders and folks in the space who are listening to this, of, I'll say, of a certain generation might be like, oh yeah, yeah, this makes perfect sense. Yeah, be vulnerable, be honest. Yeah, we love it. We love that stuff. But there are still a lot of leaders of other generations, other mindsets, who may not necessarily see the value or importance of having open mental health, vulnerable conversations in the workplace, in the business space. And so I'm curious, have you encountered any opposition to this venture? Are there any like misconceptions that if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I only want to talk about the deals and the numbers, I don't want to talk about me, being depressed or anything like that. Any, I guess, misconceptions that you will want to clear up about why that's okay?
Yeah, one, I think we have to acknowledge that everybody approaches the topic of mental health from a different perspective, from their own lived experiences. There are generational perspectives on that. I think there are ethnicity perspectives, there are geographic perspectives on that, and even like socioeconomic. So there's a lot of things that um, I think go into where someone is on their mental health journey. And I think that should be respected, right? I think our goal in the Founder Mental Health Pledge, and I think overall, if we think about what success looks like in founder mental health, it's not to force the conversation, or it's not to force people to, oh, you must, start your stand up or your morning meeting with talking about mental health. I think it's to allow people to approach it where it meets them, right? So I think, generationally, we have to respect that people are, some are more comfortable talking about mental health than others. Some are more invested in their mental health journey. Some ethnicities are more open than others, and I think that has to be considered. The goal is just to start, right? Like, I think one of the universal truths that we find around mental health is that everyone, right, everyone to the person, regardless of generation, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of socioeconomic, everyone has been affected by mental health, whether it is themselves or they have, a family member. Everyone, to the person, right, has been affected by mental health. That's why, even from a government perspective, right, it was called, an epidemic and acknowledged as pervasive, because it is literally everybody has been affected by mental health. So I think the, important thing is just to acknowledge that everyone will come at it from their own perspective and not to force the issue. And also, again, like, social safety is really, really important. And I think for us now, we're thinking about community at the largest scale of the startup ecosystem and creating that and impact. But there will also be, as we get into our research, right, we'll understand what that means for communities, what that means in different geographies, and we'll, try to amplify solutions that are appropriate for the community or for the geography or for the ethnicity. And I think that's the goal. And even talking to providers of, every solution is not for everyone, every modality is not for everyone. You have to find, meet people where they are and find out the solution that works for them. It could be, a community of kind of having the conversation. It could be clinician. It could be something related to kind of physical health. It could be all different types of modalities. And I think that's really important to respect that and to allow people to engage in the mental health conversation in a very genuine way that feels respective to their background and kind of where they are on their journey.
I love that's a conversation that are people having that conversation, intersectionality within the mental health discussion in entrepreneurship, like that's some like new level stuff. Just because like I'm a nerd about this stuff, you mentioned some of the research that you all are doing or pursuing. Is it possible to give us like a little taste, a sneak peek of some of the research that you all are focusing on?
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk about the research, and I wanted to talk about too, like, some of the other impact programming that we have. One of the so Michael Friedman is one of the seminal names who, he's done an amazing amount of research. Yale Benjamin, with Startup Snapshot, she's doing a lot more. Ute Stefan out of King's College in the UK is also doing a lot of research on founders' mental health, and we're partnering with King's College to um, create research, what is going to be, we hope, kind of the annual source of research around kind of founder mental health, and it's going to be global. And really, the intent of the research is to look at the causation, look at the nuances of founder mental health. And the other is, on a year over year average, we want to understand, is it getting better or is it getting worse? Right. I think we've seen anecdotal numbers that shows that it's not getting better, right? From last year to this year, that things are not necessarily improving. We're hoping that, the work that we're doing, the resources that we're amplifying, that it will create change. But like that is, one of the important parts of our research is just to understand, right? Because it's a talked about topic when there's a startup ecosystem, but it is still very much under research. So our goal is to not only just research this for a year, but we hope that this research study will be going on every year, right? And this will become kind of the annual research. And I think that's one of the most important parts for us, and what's led to our programming is just listening. Research will allow us to understand much more and really understand how we can lean in. And just to touch on our impact programming, a little more, research and community are one of the top, right? Like creating community safe space. That's number one, right? We want to make sure that we do that. Researching, understanding causation, understanding, what does this really look like? What does this look like different in geographies, ethnicities, all the different things? Like what is really happening underneath the topic of founder mental health? The other, though, for founders, what's really important for us is that we're creating resources, right? So the thing that is unique around founders are, there's the analogy to performance athletes. And I think that's true in some cases. What is true is founders are unique, right? We are a unique breed. We are usually like high performing, of a certain personality type. And I think we're all clinicians, all resources, all solutions are not necessarily relevant for founders. So one of the things that we're doing as well for founders is making sure that we have resources that are relevant to the community. So we have 53 resources now on our site, and that's growing, and we're going to have more resources to that. And that's everything from app-based solutions to clinicians to executive coaches to performance and well-being coaches to those who are even app-enabled solutions that are looking at everything from kind of heart rate and nutrition, and then giving wellness related things on that. So like that is a big part of what we're doing. And then for investors, I mentioned a bit, the investors are a core stakeholder for us, and what that means is that they're the signaling for the industry, right? They are the signaling for the industry to actually lean in to create impact. And the signing of the pledge was great. That was a start, right? That was a signal to the industry that, yes, this is important to you, founders. This is important to me as an investor. I'm signing the pledge. This is my intention, right? It shows that it's an interest to me. The next step is really to lean in to action. So we have what we hope is going to be a transformative clause within term sheets that gives stated permissions to the portfolio companies to use funds that are given within that term sheet to prioritize their mental wellness in whatever version. So software, executive coaching, clinician, things like that. And then for the ecosystem, and the ecosystem would be those who are creating solutions for this community. We're also serving as a thought partner for them. So it's interesting that we have become the definitive organization on the topic. So we're, getting a great inbounds and having amazing conversations with all the players, and the ecosystem players. We're also sharing insights of what the community is saying, what the investors, the overall sentiment from founders, and how they can lean in. So it's a big year for us on programming. And yes, research is going to be, I would say, probably our biggest tool to be able to hopefully drive systemic change within the community.
How interesting. Research as sort of like the cornerstone of community building, and you spoke about the relationships you have with other organizations who you're partnering with to do the research. And this is like this is why relationships matter. Amazing. I am curious. I mean, you've told us a lot about the programming that you all have coming up for this year. Is there anything else that you're particularly excited about or looking forward to with Founders Mental Health Pledge for 2024?
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that was important to us as a board, Naveed and Brad and I, when we were thinking about planning for last year, and for me, is that this is an impact organization, right? It's one thing to say a thing; it's another thing to do a thing. And I think we are very much in the mindset of trying to create real impact. And while we know we can't change this overnight, we do feel like there's real things that we can do to contribute. So in addition to the things that I mentioned, weekly episodic content, having ambassadors are really, really important. We're, privileged to have over 12 ambassadors from 8 different countries. Joey is one, Goody Nation, and we have a huge representation. And the ambassadors are serving to help us understand what this looks like in each of the local regions. And also, we'll have events that will allow a safe space for founders to kind of talk about founder mental health. And also, we're rolling out a lot of education, because I think what I mentioned earlier on is that there's so many different modalities within the wellness and performance space. And our job is not to amplify a certain one. It's really to educate the community on, here are all the modalities, and hopefully then they'll be able to make a choice. So towards the back half of the year, we've been able to work with amazing providers to have cohorts that we're going to offer from 10 to 12 members that they'll be able to take for 4 weeks and have experience in all the different modalities. So we'll start those toward the back half of the year. Fundraising is something that we're also going to heavily be working on. We are a 501(c), so this is a nonprofit organization. The work that we do is based on the funding that we're able to create, and we hope, and one of our goals this year is that we also probably towards the Q2, Q3 timeframe, are going to work on grants to pre-seed founders. And one of the reasons why that's important, like, our organization is a catalyst. We want to be a catalyst for the conversation, the catalyst for the investors. We see that in the clause, a catalyst for research and kind of understanding the issue. And also, a catalyst for people to start their journey. And we believe that those who are in Series A or above and have capitalized funds, they simply need permission and be able to prioritize to care for their well-being and mental wellness. So we're making sure that there's resources and things related to that. Pre-seed founders, who are probably, one of the unique sectors, because they're at the highest risk, they're at the start of their journey, they don't necessarily have capitalized funds. Our role there is to help and provide care, right? So we're really hoping that with the success of the fundraising campaign, we'll be able to provide grants to pre-seed founders to cover their mental health care for hopefully between 6 and 12 months. And hopefully that will be the start of their journey. And really, our goal with that is that it becomes a flywheel, that, we start founders who are on the start of their journey and thinking about wellness. Then we start that. And then as they become successful and capitalize funds, that they can then kind of contribute. So it becomes this flywheel that, is building on itself to provide care. And the last thing that I would just mention on that is, with all of this, and I think our hope is that this is preventive, right? Our goal is that we are allowing founders to seek care and have conversations before it becomes, a critical need. Because when it's critical, it's much harder to lift yourself up and kind of start your wellness journey. And it's the term that's used in medicine is universal preventive care, and like that is the goal, right? The same way, and Brad Baum had mentioned, analogy of, we want mental health care to become synonymous in the same way that dental healthcare is. And like that is our goal, is that we create an environment and create an ecosystem where it is just a matter of fact, right? In the same way that someone would have a gym membership or talk about, physical fitness, they are doing the same for their mental fitness and their mental well-being. So like that is the goal, and we're hoping that we'll be able to lean into that in a very big way with a lot of the programming that I mentioned.
So it sounds like you all have a very big year ahead
We
of
do, we do.
all of the things. No, that's incredible. And I guess speaking of which, how can people find out more about Founders Mental Health Pledge, find out more about you, find out how they can stay tapped in with all the things you all are going to be doing?
100%. First way I would say, follow us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our biggest community. So Founder Pledge on LinkedIn, you'll find us there. That is I would say, the best place to stay in touch as far as education. Our website, founderpledge.com, is the best place to sign the pledge and also access resources and donate, right? Like, as we mentioned, we are a 501(c), so we have the ability to take in funds. And, Twitter is something you can stay in touch with us there as well. But I would say LinkedIn and our website are the largest communities. And we'll be, building more, especially on our website presence, as far as episodic content and things like that. And you can find me, first name Claude, middle name Alan. So Claude Alan Woodruff on LinkedIn, and even, sharing my email. Happy to share that as well. The way to get in touch with me would be Alan, ALAN, at founderpledge.com. I have probably 20 to 15 meetings per week, which is an amazing thing. So like we have quite a bit of inbound, but like that is the beauty of this, right? We want more people to, number one, join the community and reach out and, find out if there's ways that they can contribute to the community or to some of the impact programming we're doing.
Amazing. Well, folks, we've done it again. This has been an intriguing conversation about relationship building in the innovation space from the perspective of storytelling and vulnerability as a relationship building tool, research as a relationship building tool, partnership with other organizations. But what I hope the core message that came through in this conversation is that the first relationship you need to prioritize is your relationship with yourself and your wellness and your mental health. None of this is going to be possible if you aren't looking after you. And so we're grateful for organizations like Founders Mental Health Pledge, who are making these conversations much more accessible for everyone. And thank you so much, Alan, for coming on today. This has been another exciting episode of Why Relationships Matter in the Innovation Economy. And as our Goody Nation founder, Joey Womack, always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Thank you for listening.